welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I am Jack Roney. I'm with my usual partner in crime, Harry Colfer. G'day, Harry. How are you?
G'day, all good. I'm just having a giggle at the glitch there that we had at the start. But
Yeah,
anyway,
shoot
that's
it. No,
easy.
no,
It's easy to edit those ones out.
yeah, no one needs to know about what goes on in the back end of these productions. So we have Camille Booker back with us for our second episode. Great to see you again, Camille. Thanks for sticking with us to have a further chat. Great to see you.
Hi, Jack. Hi, Harry. Thanks again for
G'day.
having me.
So, Camille, you also do manuscript assessments with authors. You work with authors. So we thought what we might do is we'll focus specifically on that. I know we've in previous episodes we talked about editing specifically, and we actually had another editor, Lauren Daniels, was on our show, and she went through specific points, things that she sees from an editor's lens. And I'm sure people who are writers will understand that they have to get their manuscripts edited, but I guess the manuscript assessment is a different beast altogether, isn't it? It's well, maybe can you just explain what is a manuscript assessment? Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. Because so many people who offer manuscript assessments, I think they would be slightly different for every person. So what I try to offer is working with the writer about what they want out of the manuscript assessment. You know, some writers may want me to look at the whole picture sort of thing and give them an idea on what's working, what's not. And other writers might, be looking for more specific things, say the character development of a particular character, or, is there enough tension or conflict or that sort of thing. So it can be quite varied. So usually I like to have that initial discussion with the writer ahead of going ahead with the assessment. But I on my website I say I can look at a whole range of things, the big picture things like plot and structure, characterization, point of view, pace, all of those sorts of things. And then I'll write up a big report about each of those dot points. And also I like to mark up the writer's manuscript as well, just because as I'm reading, I'll just write down my thoughts in the comment section of Word, or if it's PDF, so that's what I can provide. And I think they're very helpful. I mean, I got one for What If You Fly, and I got one for The Woman in the Waves. And the advice that you get from them, the detailed, specific advice, it just elevates your story to the next level. You've taken it as far as you can go. You've done that many drafts and you've taken it to the level that you think, okay, I can't possibly make this any better. I don't know what to do next. That's the moment that I think manuscript assessments from someone who has fresh eyes, has an outsider perspective, an objective perspective, time for them to come and have a read and provide some feedback.
And I definitely think for me personally, it was the best thing I ever did. The feedback that I was given in my manuscript assessment was so helpful, and it enabled me to get rid of a lot of superfluous content, and the advice I was given, start from the action, and to restructure the way I told the story. Because when as you say, when you're reading your own manuscript, you're looking line by line, you don't see the forest for the trees, and you need that set of fresh eyes to come in and take a kind of a global approach to your story. So maybe can we start working our way through? There's a number of sort of points that comprise a manuscript assessment. You've already talked about plot and structure, so that's a good place to start. What are the things that you're looking for in terms of plot and structure?
So often what happens with, early writers or writers that are just starting out, they will concentrate on the main plot of their story, but they'll forget about the subplots. I think a story needs to have a few things going on at the same time. That's what creates interesting stories, and the way that the writer ties them all together at the end, that's what makes readers so satisfied at the ending. So I think often there's no subplot or no little tangents that the story goes off on. So another thing that I sometimes see with regards to plot is that saggy middle. Have you heard of that
Yes.
saggy middle? That I mean, I still do it too, and you need to be so careful, because if you're not excited writing it, then readers aren't going to be excited as they're reading it. So I think always finding where you can insert that rising tension and have the plot moving forward, and inserting like unexpected things happening, having good things happen to the characters and bad things happening. Yeah, just always being surprising, I think, is important to plot. One of the good craft books that I use for plot is the Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Have you heard of that one?
Yes, I have heard of it. Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's really good. It's simple. It's taken from the screenwriter's structure, so 3-act structure, and it's just the best, simplest craft explanation on how to plot your story. It's really good.
Great. What about
I was just going to ask about I had my first draft of Dead Regular. I was lucky enough to have a friend whose agent was one of Curtis Brown's agents in the UK.
Wow.
And he didn't take me on. But what he did was gave me a lot of feedback about the manuscript and where he wanted it, and what he thought needed to change about it, which was fantastic as effectively exactly that. And I got it for free, which was great.
Oh.
But one of the things that he did pick up on was the fact that I would do all of these stories that were off in tangents that had no relevance to the plot. And it's sometimes it's difficult to know when you get told you need to have subplots, whereabouts are your subplots going, and are they necessary? Because a lot of the time it's like, no, you've got to cut all of that out and keep to the main plot. But then where does the subplots come in?
That's true. I guess it's a really fine line, isn't it? Like, you can have too many, and if they have no relevance, then why are they there?
Yeah.
So strip it back. So I guess, yeah, you just have to go with your intuition. And if there's no I guess way that they can tie up at the ending, or if they don't crop up in the middle somehow, then they're probably not needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember, well, I've read a book recently, and it was like I think I described it. I haven't actually published this as a review or anything. Because I tend to any books I read, I will review them myself for my own purposes. And I said it was like a life raft of a plot floating in a sea of vignettes, because there was all of these things going off in tangents that had nothing to do with the plot. And you eventually get to the end of the story, and it's like, what did all those things have to do with the story? I'm confused. Yeah. And I think that's obviously the extreme version of that.
Yeah.
And the next point we're going to talk about is character development and motivation. And I think from my take on that is that does follow on from your subplots. Some people will say, well, the subplot will help define the characters. So the character's subplot, you know, what happened in their backstory. Yeah. So maybe there could be some linkages there in terms of relevance. So Camille, what's your take on character development and motivation?
Yeah, so with motivation, a lot of the time when I read manuscripts, I feel like their motivation isn't strong enough, that it's not enough to drive the whole story forward, or it doesn't matter enough. So I think choosing something really, really strong for the character's motivation is a good starting point. You need to have that before you can move forward with your story. And it has to, I guess, be a little bit relatable as well, so readers can feel like they understand and empathize with the character. In terms of development and tying into plot, I had something I was going to say. What was it? It's gone.
It's all good. Don't worry.
You'll think about it at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'll sit up in bed. Oh, that's what I was going to say. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
we're going to the pot.
we're talking about backstory and how that kind of leads into character development.
She's got it now. She's remembered.
I remember now. Backstory. Yes. So when I did Curtis Brown course, I learned something really interesting. And I didn't know this beforehand, but each story has to have mystery and suspense. And it's not just, you know, your crime stories that have that. Every story has it. Mystery is the backstory. So what do readers not know and need to find out? That's what the mystery is, the past. And the suspense comes in the form of what's happening next, so the present narrative. So each story, if you can weave backstory and present story, mystery and suspense in that way that just keeps readers turning the page, that's when you get that good balance, and that's when you don't get the saggy middle, and that's when you get, you know, your plot moving forward. So that's what I'd forgotten I was going to say.
Thanks.
Yeah, I
Another,
thought that was quite revolutionary when I heard that explained in that way.
Yeah.
and part of that point talks about exposition. I think maybe we've already covered off on that in our last chat. We talked about info dumps and how you can sort of dilute that. What about the next point of view?
Yeah, a lot of the time, the obvious ones are head hopping. So changing point of view within a scene or within the same paragraph, that's, you know, a big red flag. But thankfully, I think that can be pretty easily fixed, you know, in edits. So that's something that does happen. Another thing that we learnt about in our Curtis Brown course was something called narrative and psychic distance. So how far you are telling the story from the character's point of view. So, you know, you could be, and the famous example of explaining psychic distance has to do with this idea of a historical event happening, and it was really snowy, and this character walked outside, and, you know, he doesn't like the snow because it's cold, and whatever. You get this very formal, sort of far away version of events, but then you get the closer psychic distance events, and it's, you know, told in a way that's like snow under your collar, in your next to your skin, it's really cold. You know, you get that feeling of the closeness. So learning about psychic distance and varying that within your scenes, I think, is important too. Not always being so close, that you're always so close inside your character's head. Having a little bit of distance at some points and knowing when to zoom in and zoom out, I think, is important.
And just on that, I don't think it's in a part of our list, but the idea of tense, whether we're talking past or present, what you just said kind of reminded me about, you know, the proximity between, you know, the storyteller and the events that are unfolding. For example, I'm writing a manuscript at the moment. There's two concurrent timelines. One is a historical timeline, and I've chosen to use past tense for that timeline. But then the present timeline is a female detective, and I'm writing it in present tense. And I'm finding that using present tense allows me to be a little bit closer because it's what she's experiencing right now, as opposed to the character telling something that happened in the past. Do you have any kind of comments on using tense?
Yeah, definitely. I went to the what was it called? The South Coast Writers Festival. I think it was in Ulladulla this last year. And I listened to, you know, Peter Fitzsimons. I listened to him talk at one of the events, and he writes historical, not fiction, but it is fiction because it is taking, you know, historical events and writing a story about it. And he said, what I do is I take an event, I put it in the present tense, and I write the story. So he always writes in the present tense, even though he's writing about past events. And he said it's because he wants readers to feel like they're there, that they're experiencing it now, and it's happening, and they can feel it. And I think it's becoming more in vogue. I think that's what readers want. They want to be immersed like that. So yeah, I think past tense can have some good uses, I think, but present tense, even if you're writing about, you know, past events, I think can be really effective.
I prefer writing in past tense. That's most of my writings in past tense. I did do the prologue for Dead Regular is in present tense because I was being ironic because it was a thing that was in the past, much further in the past. And so I did it in present tense to make it different from the rest of the book. But I did find it more difficult writing in present tense.
I guess it's
I don't
what
know.
you feel as well, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
I wrote What If You Fly in past tense. And Woman in the Waves, it's told from two different point of views. One is past tense, one is present tense. But I think that's just how it came to me. It just came that way. So it's just what you prefer as well.
And the reason why I chose to do it was because I'm telling two timelines, and they're through alternate chapters. So every second chapter, you go back into the other timeline, and it just helps your readers adjust to, okay, we're now in the past.
I think that's one of those things. I mean, it's why I wanted to make that the prologue stand out. And originally, when I wrote the prologue, it was interspersed between the normal chapters. And the Curtis Brown agent told me, no, stick it as a prologue. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's why I originally did it, to make it clear. And I guess that's why you're doing it, Jack, to make it clear that you flip-flopping between the different time zones or
Yeah.
timelines.
Yeah. Now, so Camille, the next point on your list is pace. We talked before about the saggy middle. Are we talking more about keeping your story pushing ahead? Is that what you're talking about in terms of pace?
Yeah. So some of the things that can slow the pace, and I was definitely guilty of this in writing What If You Fly, is too much description. And I think as writers, we love words, we love thinking about descriptions and beautiful ways of explaining things and describing things. So we can all fall into this trap. And there is definitely a certain time and place for beautiful descriptions, as long as it's doing two or more things to the story. Every sentence either needs to move the plot forward or expose your characters. So if you're telling a beautiful description from your character's point of view, I think that's okay. But just having description there for the reason of having it there, I don't think is really needed. So yeah, that's to do with pace. And another thing that I see is starting too early. And I think we mentioned this too. You have to start right in the action. So many people or writers think that they need to set the scene for readers, but readers don't need that. They just want to have when the story starts and go. So
Yeah.
Unless you're Stephen King, and then you can do what the hell you like.
exactly. Yeah. The king can do whatever he wants.
Okay, what about next point is dialogue. You could talk about this for 6 episodes, but what are the key takeaways for you about dialogue?
Again, having dialogue, and my PhD supervisors said this to me too. Dialogue needs to, not always, but the best dialogue, it has a double entendre. It does two things at the same time. So the characters could be saying one thing but meaning another, and it's within those subtle meanings that the readers can really feel involved in the story and like they're working it out. So the best dialogue does those sorts of things. Some of the common mistakes I often see in manuscript assessments with dialogue is often it's very on the nose or expository. So they use dialogue for info dumping. And also a common thing I've been seeing lately is no dialogue tags and just whole pages of dialogue, like it's just a screenplay. And they forget to add in, little actions in between.
Got to do the actions because you have no idea who's talking.
There's one on the other, and it's been a page, and you think, hang on, I forget
who's talking.
Exactly.
Particularly if you've got more than 2 characters.
Yeah. You had a character in your second book, I believe, which was Irish. Did you use any? I know we're not supposed to use accents and write them as accents and like that, but did you use anything that would clearly define them as Irish?
There's one moment that I have included, and it's when he's saying, he says 2 or 3. And so
Tree.
my female character makes fun of him and she goes 2 or tree, and like having a little flirt or a little laugh. So there's that one thing. I didn't want to fall into the trap of, stereotyping or laughing about, accents or whatever like that. So yeah, I try to avoid it, but
Right.
Okay. What about if we move on to writing style?
yes, writing style. So what do I see? Oh, often I see too many words to explain or to say one thing. So overriding and not finding the right words. So not finding those beautiful verbs that could maybe replace 2 or 3, words in one sentence. Just finding the right word for what you want to say. Using active verbs, so not ing, but the active version of it. And yeah, just those common cliches that everybody sometimes falls into using.
Adverbs.
One writing style that a lot of because I was writing crime fiction, but I was very much influenced by James Patterson. And we're talking before about pacing and having too much description, which can slow your pacing down. James Patterson, because we know he's been very prolific and he's pumped out so many books and he's co-authored with other authors. But his writing style is fast and straight to the point. His chapters are very small. The story it goes through it at an incredible pace. He doesn't get caught up in convoluted prose, but he will use one or two words which will describe a scene. An explosion rips apart a bank, and it's this high octane scene. He'll just describe that with a few words and then move on.
Yeah.
So his writing style is very fast paced, but I guess it's because readers know what to expect. For those people who want to have a slower burn and be really immersed in that storytelling and being immersed in the scene setting, they might not like that kind of style of writing.
That's exactly right. And I guess you have to think about, James Patterson's probably banging out books once a year or maybe even twice a year. So he wants readers to buy his books, read them quickly, and then move on to another book, or hopefully of his. Whereas I think some writers might take 4 or 5 years to write a book, and they want their readers to read it slowly and savor every sentence and all of that. So I think, yeah, different authors, different books, different readers, you all want different things.
I think James Patterson manages to bang out so many books because he doesn't write them all. He's, the number of ones where he's written with another author, and you go,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you can pump out a hell of a lot more if you've got 10 other authors writing 50 to 70% of the thing, and you just effectively put your oversight and your name on it.
Yeah.
But am I transgressing there?
No,
I know you're a great fan.
Camille, what about theme? We had another guest on recently, and we are talking about, do you have any key messages or underlying theme that's, how does that tie in with your character arc? And he said, no, I just want to tell a really good yarn. I just want to tell a really good story. So, and I'm the same. When I write a story, I'm not thinking, what's my overall theme? But when I look back, I think, oh, maybe there is a theme. What's the key message I'm trying to get across? What's your take on this notion of theme?
I think I agree with you. I think you're there to write your story. You've got this story in your head that you just want to get down on paper. You're not thinking about any morally, messages or anything like that. You just want to write your story. And once you've done that, that's when you go back and read it and you think, actually, there are certain themes that keep recurring, or messages or morals from my story that I could maybe, strengthen or pull out. But I always think subtlety is better. You don't want to be lecturing your readers about,
Preachy.
yeah, you don't want to be preachy. You don't want to, you don't want your readers to come away and think, who is she or he to tell me how to live my life? I just want to read a story. So yeah, I agree with you. I think you just write the story that you want to write. And if there's a theme in there that you can draw on, yeah, pull it out, but only ever do it subtly, I think.
Yeah. Okay, well, the next point is voice. I know we talked about use of accents and dialogue, but voices, the way I understand voices is if you do have different characters speaking, and if you were to remove all your dialogue tags, you would still be able to work out who's speaking because the way the sentences are structured and so on. What's your take on voice?
Yeah, voice is such a tricky one because it is this sort of abstract notion that it's hard to define. But you're right. I think and there's different voices too. You've got your author voice that you always will fall back on, and then you're trying to develop your character voices because, yeah, you want them to sound different and unique and differentiate them from other people. So I think the best way to do that is just to spend time with your characters if you can, daydream about them, talk to them, imagine them in different scenarios. How would they respond under pressure? How would they react? How would they say certain things? I know for what Woman in the Waves, because I've got two point of views. I've got Missy and Detective Shaw. I've used, this is just like a random example, but Missy uses the word wooden for like wooden wharf or gangplank or whatever, wooden crates. Whereas I've got Shaw using the word timber. And I don't know why, but that's just one thing I think, okay, so I know that she will always use that. So I can go back and search for wooden in her her chapters and make sure he's saying timber in his chapters. So that's just one random example, but I think that shows you how you can, differentiate your characters and voices and make sure that they're using their specific words and how they would talk and tell their story. But yeah, it's a tricky one to get right.
Do you base any of your characters on people you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, everyone. Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because then it was just the way you said, oh, spend some time with your characters, and you're like, I know what she means. Yeah. So I've had several of my paramedic characters certainly have been based on usually an amalgam of people.
Yeah.
So you take some characters from that, some traits from that one, and then you amalgam the looks from one and the traits from the other, and then there's your character. And
Exactly.
then
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what about setting? We talked about your two books and the two different settings. What's your take on that from a manuscript assessment point of view?
Okay, so I know we spoke about too much detail, too much description can slow the pace, but on the other side of it is, have you heard of white room syndrome?
No.
no.
That's where the characters are just doing something, whether they're speaking in dialogue or doing their, actions, and there's
I
just
know what you
no
mean.
yeah, there's nothing. And you just think, where am I? What does it look like? What does it sound like? So yeah, I do see that happen sometimes. I think as a writer or as writers, either you love description and setting or you steer clear of it and you just don't go there. So I think yeah, with setting, it's important even just to have, one or two lines at the beginning of your scene or chapter to give the reader an idea of where they are, to ground them, and yeah, to make your characters move through space.
Yeah, I think I've got about well, I've got a team of beta readers that I have, and my latest novel, the terrorist plot, High Acuity, I had a lot of the full octane sort of high octane stuff being done by the main characters and what's going on with those, and beta readers like going, what are the passengers doing? I
Yeah.
haven't heard anything from them. And you went, oh yeah.
Oh, good
And so,
point.
I mean, it's an easy fix because you just had to add in a few words here and there to make it more inclusive of everyone who was there,
Yeah.
and a few sort of add-ins. But if you don't get that feedback, then yes, you can, because you tend to obviously, if it's a high action sort of setting and something that's going on, then your focus is going to be on that. And sometimes you forget that there are going to be other people there, and there's going to be other noises, there's going to be other things that you need to add in to make it more realistic.
Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about before, when you can't see the forest for the trees, because you're focusing on so much on what your main character is doing, and you need like outsider perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just finally, the last point is genre expectations.
So I was thinking about this one because I wasn't really sure if I could do a little summary of what I see, but I think the majority of writers are writing in the genre that they love to read in. As I started reading historical fiction, and so I started writing historical fiction because I just loved it. I think writers are intuitive of what they're reading and what they see in the books that they love. So they know what to write when it comes to conventions and expectations of readers in terms of genre. Obviously, if you're writing in a genre that you don't read in, I think it's important to Google what the expectations and the conventions are for that, because yeah, readers will be expecting them. But if you decide to write in the genre that you're most familiar with, I think already you've got a really good idea of what you need to be doing in terms of fulfilling those expectations.
I don't know whether you've heard about it, but there's the short story challenge competition, and basically it's been going on for a few years now, but I've enrolled in that just to see how it goes. But what happens is you get separated off into groups, obviously digitally, and you get told what genre you had to submit a short story in, and you get a week to write it.
Oh wow. What a challenge.
And then there's four 4 rounds, and so if the top whatever go to the next round, and they have to do it, and it will be a different genre that you have to write in. So I
That
thought
scares me so
that
much.
sounds really challenging.
Wow.
I'm expecting to drop at the first hurdle, but you know what the hell, you've got to give it a go.
On you. Yeah, that sounds really cool. And you're going to learn so much too.
I just hope it's not going to be romance that I end up with, because I'm just going to be useless then. As we found from a previous podcast.
Yes, that was, and again, we've had authors and industry experts covering quite a broad cross section of different genres. So that's what that's what we're aiming to do for us to learn as well. And we had a guest, Ali Blake, teach us about writing romance, so it was very informative.
Well, I mean, romance has really come up these past few years, and it's like a genre that I haven't read a lot in, but obviously I've got romantic elements in both of my novels. So, you know, I'm open to it. I really want to read more in that genre. I think it sounds, you know, those rom-coms that I see everywhere on Bookstagram, I'm up for reading. I think that's going to be my 2024 resolution, is to read more of those.
And we also talked about the option of crossing over between genres as well. You can still be writing a crime thriller with an element of romance, or vice versa.
Exactly.
So it's something that I've steered clear of romance because I just felt uncomfortable writing it. But in terms of trying to broaden my horizons as an author, it's I think you got to be prepared to sort of start creeping into areas that are not necessarily your comfort zone.
Well, absolutely right. And it's like me with Women in the Waves. You know, I'd never even thought I was going to write a detective character storyline. So that scared me at the start as well. But, you know, I just took it one bit at a time and worked it out. And with the help of some very lovely Hawkeye authors, managed to make it seem realistic. So, yes, thank you very much, Jack.
My pleasure. Well, look, I know we've only touched the tip of the iceberg with all those tips in terms of the things that you cover, Camille, when you do your manuscript assessments, and we could probably talk about each of those in far more detail. But that just gives us a bit of a broad sort of range of the sort of things that you look at. So what's your advice for people who are going to be looking at using your services for manuscript assessments? They can contact you through your website, camillebooker.com. Any sort of just final words for people who are considering using your services?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, I guess, again, like if you get to a point where you just don't know where to go from, and you've had, you know, a couple of people read it and give you their feedback, and you've implemented that, and then you're stuck, I think that's the point that and as we both know, manuscript assessments are worth every penny. So I know it can seem like an investment, but I think if you get the right person to do it, it's worth every penny. So yeah.
And that was going to be my next question. How do you get a good fit between authors and editors, or authors and well, I guess manuscript assessment is still another form of editing, but how do you find someone that's going to be a good fit for you?
Yeah, I think it's important to have expectations out at the outset, you know, what the writer is hoping to get out of the assessment, whether that's to help with plot, or if they're happy with their plot, to focus in on something else, because there's no point me working through someone's plot and changing things that don't need to be changed, or the author doesn't want to be changed. So that initial meeting, I think, is probably the most important part of the process, because finding out what they want and acting accordingly, I think that's how you're going to get the most out of the session.
And just as a random thought, as I had, is your assessment? Do you do it all digitally? Like you were saying, you know, whether it's Word or PDF. I presume you don't print anything out these days.
No, it's all on computer. Yeah, no, I try and save the trees, save some paper. It's all on computer nowadays.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, well, look, we might wind up this episode. Thanks, Camille. It's been a fantastic chat, and I'm sure very informative for any budding authors and writers who are listening to this. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, and it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much.
For having me. Thank you.